Buenas and half a day. Lieutenant Governor Tenorio and I are excited to welcome you to a Chamorro symphony of music and memories that honor our Senmet goods and Manesnguna Mainaina, the strong and brave survivors of World War II in Guam. I would like to thank the Guam War Survivors Memorial Foundation and the Manengun Memorial Foundation for their continued commitment to honoring our war survivors and telling their stories. And what better way to celebrate than through music? In 2016, I attended the Foundation's first Sentimental Journey concert with my mother, Eugenia Afligui Leon Guerrero. I can recall the absolute joy in her eyes that night as she swayed and clapped excitedly in her seat while some of our island's most talented musicians played the songs she loved when she was younger. My mother was only 11 when Japan invaded our island, and she had to grow up quickly during those very difficult years. But music helped to keep her spirit young, and she has never been shy about singing along to her favorite songs. That is why I value these moments that we dedicate to survivors like my mom, because they remind us not just of the hardships they overcame, but also of the joy they found in each other and in music that got them through.
Half a day, I echo the Governor's gratitude to the Guam War Survivors Memorial Foundation and the Manengun Memorial Foundation for creating opportunities for our community to honor our war survivors. I also agree that music has been instrumental to the strength and endurance of our Manyina, especially during and after the war. I think of my maternal grandmother, Tenbarsi Taitano Francus, who dedicated much of her life to teaching the Chamorro language. She captured our stories in song through Kantan Chamarita, and most significantly as a member of the cathedral's choir. Whenever I hear Aten Jesu Christu, I picture her singing it with such conviction. It makes me think of her experiences during the war and the time she must have sung this powerful hymn then. It is a unifying song for her generation and our generation, and one that continues to bring great comfort and hope. May the survivors watching this symphony continue to find joy, comfort, and hope in the music that is shared today.
And may the families of survivors who are no longer with us remember their loved ones as they listen along. Enjoy the symphony.
Hafa Ade, Guahu si Willie B. Flores, the chairperson of the Manengun Memorial Foundation. We are honored to partner with the Guam War Survivors Memorial Foundation on this special War Survivor Remembrance Day to honor our island's greatest generation with music. Inspired by Jack DeMello's symphony production of the Music and Legends of Guam, our musical director, Joey Franquez, found similarities between the symphony and our survivors' experiences. Like the opening allegro in sonata form, the war struck the island quickly and by surprise. Then, like the symphony's slow second movement, families moved quietly and prayed softly. The war ended, and they could dance again like a graceful minuet. With firm resolve, our survivors rise like the symphony's closing allegro, reminding us we are strong and must step bravely into the future. This tribute, honoring Guam's World War II survivors, was made possible with support from the following partners. To open the symphony, we welcome the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force Band playing their rendition of the Guam hymn.
Every year on December 8, thousands of residents gather at the Dulce Nombre de Maria Cathedral Basilica in Hagåtña to celebrate the feast of the Immaculate Conception and honor the island's patron saint. The event typically consists of reverent prayer and a procession of the faithful around the village. On December 8, 1941, however, the sounds of solemn celebration were replaced by blaring alarms and the crash of bombs exploding as World War II touched down in the Pacific during one of the holiest days of the year. The attack on Guam began only a few hours after that on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The Catholic feast day is a celebration of the Immaculate Conception of Mary, Mother of Jesus. Catholicism teaches that Mary, known to residents as Santa Maria Camelin, was born free from original sin and thus was worthy to carry God's child. The people of Guam have honored her as their patroness since the Spanish era. A 300-year-old statue of her, steeped in tradition and lore, occupies the place of honor above the altar in the basilica and is the focal point of the December 8th procession. When the bombing started that day, many residents were in Mass, either at the cathedral or in various churches around the island.
Life here in Guam, is centered around the church. December 8th is a holy day of obligation, which again is almost akin to a Sabbath day.
According to Ramirez, the attacks were centered on the village of Sumay, present-day U.S. Naval Base Guam, because of the presence of Navy and Marine forces and ships that were based at Apra Harbor. 2 days after the attack, on December 10th, Japanese forces stepped foot on Guam and began their tyranny. The village of Hagåtña, once the center of activity and social life for the Chamorro people, became the Japanese headquarters. Shortly after their takeover, the Japanese executed several to demonstrate their power.
This was to serve as a reminder that the people of Guam again had to live under the Japanese dictates. Life was very harsh for the people who, especially it was a very rapid transition of an exchange of power, from the United States system to a Japanese system, which was more regimented, more disciplined than the lax American, structure of living.
Overnight, the people of Guam were ripped away from the lives they knew that had been filled with friends, freedom, faith, and their budding American identities. Many were forced to work in labor camps, separated from their families, and killed for refusing to surrender their allegiance to America. In 1944, Uncle Sam returned to Guam and liberated the island from its captors, as so many residents believed would happen. Today, despite the atrocities of World War II and capture of the island that December day, residents still honor their patroness and give thanks for her many blessings. Ramirez added that while this is not the only December 8th occurrence that has brought hard times upon Guam's people, Super Typhoon Pongsonghua hit Guam December 8, 2002. The many tests that come on this day have not shaken the dedication of the faithful.
I think sometimes it, in a way, I think it kind of strengthens the beliefs of Chamorro on this particular feast day. And I would say, although it's kind of like ironic and maybe sounds even contradictory, but I think people's faiths, when it becomes tested, actually sometimes become stronger.
As we remember the beginning of the war, we can almost hear our loved ones gathered in prayer and song at the Hagåtña Cathedral Basilica. Capturing this sound beautifully are Sisters Sherry and Sean Wegner, accompanied by Guam War Survivors Memorial Foundation board member Joey Franquez, singing a medley of Sagan Auntie and O Maria Nananmagoth.
Na misteryo ni hatad, mamahagay sunbinu, ipanamataw-taw-taw, ungatuna isensanto. Sacramento ihatag. Mamahagay isang mino, ipagmamatataw, umatuyo na isang sang.
For decades, the Wegner sisters have graced the cathedral choir with their angelic voices. They are the legacy of their mother, World War II survivor Carmen Ingracia Juan Wegner, and they dedicate this performance to her.
O Maria, nananago, tansemangis, nananago, ogwituda tatsalani, tunanaski atsunyamo, ilegang hetas Maria, abebula gracia. Ipadgonmu umagasi, tobui tautausihan. O Maria, nananago, Jansen mamis, nananago, ogwituda tatalani, tunanaski atsunyamu, ihanen mamatau-tau, enahilumibrihit, unamago, ihinetkon, imanang hetkilangen. O Maria, Ave bula gracia, ipadgonmu magasi, todui tautausihan.
Fondly known as Tunpit Sibozas, Pedro Taitingfong Rosario was 26 years old when the Japanese invaded Guam. Tunpit served as a member of the Guam Combat Patrol and helped capture Japanese stragglers after the occupation ended.
Durulucan durukatan ni galay di tugong, tulus huzong. Durulucan durukatan ni galay di tugong, tulus huzong.
Tunpit turned to music during the war to express his emotions and resistance. In honor of Tunpit and the popular Guam and U.S. tunes he sang, local musician Jack Larimer will sing two songs Tunpit loved to perform, Galaidi Tugong and Pescadot Tugong.
Durulucan durukatan ni galay di tugong, tulus huzong. Bula boti, kuahadan denggi ikakaroti. Dururucan durukatan ni galay di tugong, tulus huzong. Durulucan durukatan ni galay di tugong, tulus huzong.
Para ikurin dan kita si bombs and the machine gun fires have died out, and okay, they obviously are, Americans are back. So we were very happy, and everybody was happy until we met the first Americans. And well, as you know, this island is very multicultural, multi-ethnic. We had Americans, Chamorro Americans, Japanese Americans, any Chinese Americans, and what have you. But when the Americans found out that some had Japanese last names, they would separate those out, and those were sent to another concentration camp. I didn't have a Japanese last name, but because we were caught in a group that had Japanese, we were all thrown into the same prisoner of war category.
Bendición San Minagro, Manaynahu. Viva para our World War II survivors. Sentimental journey.
Iman via na tiempo man boca mamaon manadanya iafo amaska zanihagon.
Born just 3 years after the war ended, with a voice meant to heal and unite, recording artist Johnny Sablan has dedicated over 50 years of his life to making Chamorro music. Imambiha na Tiempo and Dalay Neni are two songs Johnny popularized that are emblematic of the uplifting music from the post-war era.
Ilan gin sumohi wana tristi sumohi niya wastarias unkilis tonu zangin wahapinitinya.
Imambiha na Tiempo was written by World War II survivor Clotilde Ding Gould. Her writing and advocacy and Johnny Sablan's music have inspired new generations of Chamorro speakers and singers.
Asinan is, like she said, she already mentioned all the routes that we made from Fonte, from Libugun to Fonte, Fonte to Asan, and Asan to Asinan. There in Asinan, we dug our bokungo, they call it bokungo, the cave, and what's called coconut leaf for making a hut for our family. And at that time, everything was going fine. Like she said, we stole everything from the Japanese. I'm sorry, Council. We stole everything from the Japanese storeroom before we left for Asinan. So, like I say, it's a survival, you know. In Asinan, really, our life is really restricted from the Japanese Imperial Army. They live not too far away, maybe 300 feet yard from our camp. So there we was restricted to anything that we do, but our men in the morning they group up to go get something to find something to eat. So they pick up anything from a young papaya to young breadfruit, and anything that is eatable, they will bring it to the camp. One time they brought a cow that was pregnant, ready to deliver, and they slaughtered that cow, and even the babies was split among the group in our camp. So food is a little bit scarce in those places. So, and
Guam's favorite musical duo, Jesse Baez and Ruby Santos, sings a medley of Hagu Ina ni Langit and Ipution Itzatangmak, two songs that represent our people's commitment to spiritual faith and convey the deep love we have for one another. Jesse and Ruby have always supported efforts to remember our island's World War II survivors, and their music has brought our survivors great joy.
For several years right here on KUAM, we welcomed him into our homes and hearts as the host of Nihi Te Pasita and Nihi Te Hasu, programs about Guam's history and culture. Today, however, the island mourns the loss of former Guam Congressman and retired Marine Corps Brigadier General Ben Blass. According to his nephew Michael Borja, Blass died in Virginia today, surrounded by his grandchildren and two sons, Tom and Michael. As reported, he had fallen seriously ill. Blass was a survivor of the Japanese occupation. After the war, he graduated from the University of Notre Dame and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps in 1951, where he served for nearly 30 years and retired a brigadier general. Blass holds a Master's of Arts degree from George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and has an honorary Doctor of Laws degree from the University of Guam, where he taught for 2 years after retiring from the Marines. It was in 1984 when Blass was elected to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. He served the people of Guam until 1993. Although General Blass has been living off island, Guam has always been close to his heart. Blass is the author of the book Bisita Guam, A Special Place in the Sun, which he dedicated to his family. Over the years, he was also on the forefront of Guam's quest for war reparations.
The time has come for us right now to say, hey, listen, either we do this thing here or just say, Guam, we don't really give a hoot what happens to you. Now, I'm speaking as forcefully as I can, but Mr. Chairman, as respectfully as I can. I have carried the soul of this country. I have carried its pen as well. I feel very strongly about what I'm speaking about, sir.
One of Blass's last public appearances was just last October when he participated in the University of Guam's presidential lecture series titled Remembrances and Realities. Yogi President and former Guam delegate Robert Underwood, who succeeded Blass in Congress, expressed his condolences to his family, adding, quote, "He was a public servant, always had Guam in his heart and the country on his mind. I think he serves as an excellent role model on courage and determination, and we will miss his voice tremendously," end quote. As for funeral arrangements, Borja says that will be announced at a later date, but said Blass will likely be buried at the Arlington National Cemetery because that was his wish. Former Congressman Ben Blass was 85 years old.
While not the only song sung during the war, the popular Uncle Sam is the only one people of all ages can sing along with today. Interestingly, it was one of the only war songs sung in English, as the Japanese had banned the use of the language.
Sam, oh my dear Uncle Sam, won't you please come back to Guam? Our lives are in danger, oh you better come. Kill all the Japanese right here in Guam, oh Mr. Sam.
Tun Pete Sabojas wrote Uncle Sam at the end of the Japanese occupation. It was so popular that the famous recording artists, the Andrews Sisters, recorded their own version, My Dearest Uncle Sam, in 1947.
Lonely Tamarita sits upon the shore, waiting for a big ship to come and win the war. Oh, Mr. Sam, Sam, oh, my dearest Uncle Sam, won't you please come back to Guam?
Tune Pete's grandson, Peter Diaz, says, this is the song that evokes the memory of that period, the struggle, along with hope and faith that Uncle Sam would definitely come back to Guam.
Mr. Sam, Sam, oh, my dearest Uncle Sam, won't you please come?
In this contemporary rendition of Uncle Sam, local musician Rachel Esteves extends the story with new verses of her own. With her voice and her guitar, Rachel carries on the tradition of Chamorro music.
Mr. Sam, Sam, oh, my dearest Uncle Sam, won't you please come back to Guam? She said it was the one. She begged him not to leave, but the man in Washington had to send him back to sea. Oh, Mr. Sam, Sam, oh, my dearest Uncle Sam, won't you please come back to Guam? She wrote many letters, sealed them with her kisses, signed them at the bottom. Love your future, Mrs. Oh, Mr. Sam, Sam, oh, my dearest Uncle Sam, won't you please come back to Guam? On a little tiny island by the Mariana Trench, a lonely Tamarita wonders where her lover went. Oh, Mr. Sam, Sam, oh, my dear old Uncle Sam, won't you please come back to Guam? The 8th of December, 1941, the people went crazy. You're right here in Guam, oh, Mr. Sam, Sam, oh, my dearest Uncle Sam, won't you please come back to Guam?
So when I was a drill instructor during 95 through 97, I was a young sergeant down at MCRD San Diego. And I get a phone call from my family back home in Guam saying that my grandmother was not doing well and I needed to come home. We got held up in Hawaii due to aircraft troubles. So we stayed there. That next morning I get a phone call from my brother and tell me that my grandmother passed. So I didn't have an opportunity to make it home to say goodbye to my grandmother. So fast forward to the funeral, and we have probably about 4 or 5 pews deep of generations for my grandmother. And it's raining. It's raining really, really hard that day. And it's not uncommon for Guam, but that day it was raining extremely hard. And my Uncle Joe was giving the eulogy. He stops and he says, you know, it's only fitting. It's raining today. If it wasn't for the rain, none of us would be here. Then he flashes back to when the Japanese occupied Guam during World War II. So at this point, my grandmother was young and she was pregnant with my aunt. She was the oldest. And my grandmother was being lined up to be executed by the Japanese soldiers. For reasons we don't know. She was lined up to be executed. That day, when she was lined up to be executed, it was raining hard. And the Japanese soldiers called off the execution. A week later, the Marines liberated Guam. So I look back at that story and it reminds me of why I serve. It gives me an opportunity to give back to a division that gave so much to me and to the people of Guam. So I may be sitting here today, as a Marine, but to be sitting here as a Division Sergeant Major for the division that liberated my island, I just swell with pride.
Joining us again to honor the armed forces for their role in bringing the Japanese occupation to an end, the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force Band will perform the Marine Hymn. A beautiful chorus has risen from the ashes of our island's bombed villages. Guam has a history of talented entertainers who have achieved both local awe and international acclaim. For nearly 40 years, the Skip Entertainment Company has illustrated their vision that through dance, students have an opportunity to experience joy while developing lifelong values. Skip dancers have represented Guam on stages across the globe, where they have won countless national and international championships. We are excited to showcase the delightfully energetic Skip dancers performing to a medley of the tunes entitled On the Island of Guam and On Guam.
Si Jules Maasi for joining us in this musical celebration of Guam's World War II survivors. As the president of the Guam War Survivors Memorial Foundation, it is my humbling honor to help share the stories of our greatest generation.
May we always come together to remember our brave World War II survivors and to honor their legacy. We hope you enjoyed this symphony. Esta, adios. Closing our program is the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force Band playing the U.S. Armed Forces Medley and the Guam Territorial Band performing the Guam March. Achieving accolades in competitions around the world, Guam's official band, the Guam Territorial Band, began in 1976 as the governor's youth band. The band remains a second home and has served as an anchor for many of its youth members who have grown to become community leaders and celebrated musicians. Performing the Guam March, we end our show with the Guam Territorial Band.